All right, the recording has begun. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, everyone. My name is Will Hull, and this will be Wyoming Unit 2 for Division C, hearing for the We the People National Finals. In a moment, I'll introduce the judges, followed by the students, and then we will begin the hearing. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, and then the judges will follow up with 8 minutes of follow-up questions. My microphone will be muted during the hearing. However, I will be holding up the 1 minute and the time sign to indicate those periods of the hearing. I suggest that you use the gallery view. For those of you who are in the judging panel as well, make sure you use the gallery view so you can see everyone there, including myself with the time sign. And at the conclusion of the hearing, the judges will provide some brief feedback to the team. And at that point, we will conclude the hearing. At this point, I'll go ahead and pass it over to the panel of judges where they can introduce themselves.
I started off already with being on mute. Good morning / afternoon. At least on my mind, there's a little bit of background noise, but we're going to work through that. So let me introduce myself and then have my co-judges introduce themselves, and then if you would do the same. My name is Chuck Dunlap. I'm President and CEO of the Indiana Bar Foundation in Indianapolis, and my colleagues are...
Hello, welcome, and congratulations for being here. My name is Tim Igo. I am a lawyer, writer, and editor of a monthly magazine at the State Bar of Arizona in Phoenix.
I'm Nick Drummond. I'm an assistant professor of political science at Black Hills State University in South Dakota.
And if you would introduce yourselves.
I'm Wayne Murdoch.
I'm Sydney Black.
I'm Grant Baxter.
I'm Diomina Mercer, and we are Unit 2 from Sheridan, Wyoming, and our mentors are Michael Thomas and Kim Ferguson.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to talking with you more. Obviously, we're here for Unit 2. Question 2 is what we're going to be talking about this today. I should stop using mornings and afternoons. So let me go ahead and read that to you, and we will get started. One founder claimed that representatives should refine and enlarge the public views by passing them through a medium of a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of their country. Do you agree or disagree with this claim? And what alternative systems of representation were considered by the founders? And what alternative systems of representation, if any, should be considered in the 21st century? You may begin.
To commence, our panel agrees that, as Federalist 10 says, a republic opens a different prospect and promises the cure for which we are seeking. This republic would be formed out of a conglomeration of people with the nation's best interests at heart.
To illuminate, Federalist 52 mentions it is particularly essential that the House should have an immediate dependence on and intimate sympathy with the people. This sympathy and dependence will discourage subterfuge. Furthermore, the Senate is also able to provide long-term security for the nation.
As conveyed by Federalist 62, no government will long be respected without possessing a certain portion of order and stability. A republic also avoids the despotism and delinquency of mob rule, which is expressed by Plato when he elucidates. Dictatorship naturally arises out of democracy.
Worse still, the mob lacks the knowledge to govern itself. Annenberg Public Policy Center proves in a study of theirs that more than a third of those surveyed cannot name any of the rights guaranteed under the First Amendment. The people, however, will not lose their power.
To explain, the House, the place of the people, holds the most powerful weapon because they, according to Federalist 58, hold the purse, that powerful instrument by which we behold an infant and humble representation of the people, gradually enlarging the sphere of its activity and importance.
Thus, as Samuel Adams once stated, let each citizen, at the moment he is offering his vote, that he is executing one of his most solemn trusts to human society, for which he is accountable to God and his country.
Plato wrote in the Republic, the excess of liberty, whether in the states or individuals, seems only to pass into excess slavery. And so, tyranny naturally arises out of democracy. When there is too much freedom, people will abuse it, which ties into James Madison's idea that if all men were angels, no government would be necessary.
Many of the founding fathers, including James Madison, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson, greatly opposed the idea of direct democracy because it is essentially a mob rule and the majority would drown out the minority.
Madison amended this problem with an argument in Federalist 51. In the Federal Republic of the United States, the rights of individuals or of the minority will be in little danger from interested combinations of the majority.
However, there was an idea of representation that many delegates wanted to transfer from the Articles of Confederation. This plan of representation could be equated to today's bicameral system. Yet in a single house where delegates are proportional to population of the state, but each state gets one single vote.
Yet, with the dissolution of the Articles, representation patents were up for grabs. The individual ideas that made the Congress under the Articles were split to create the New Jersey and Virginia plans.
Virginia and her larger sister states favored the system drafted by James Madison and presented by Edmund Randolph, where representation was based on population, giving them more influence in decisions. However, New Jersey and her smaller sisters favored equal representation, drafted by William Patterson, so no state would hold too much power over them.
Benjamin Franklin was asked by a local lady, "Will our new system of government be a republic or a monarchy?" He replied with, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." Later, John Adams stated, "There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide."
With this in mind, our panel believes that the 17th Amendment should be repealed to ensure that mob rule is prevented. Thus, we reintroduce the original process outlined in Article 1 of the Constitution.
The United States was formed with the notion that a single person would never have majority rule. Instead, the U.S. was created for a group of a few selected individuals to represent the people of the United States.
Additionally, our unit would change the process in which candidates run for elected positions. Subsequently, we would change election laws so that a candidate cannot identify with a political party when running in the primary election, similar to that of Nebraska.
Ultimately, with this modification, voting citizens are obligated to educate themselves on the candidate's objectives, beliefs, and organization in office, rather than voting for a candidate solely due to their party affiliation.
Thank you. We are now ready to take your questions.
Well, thank you very much. That was a striking proposal. Let me begin with this, something I'm sure you've considered. Currently, and as configured by the founders, is the House of Representatives simply too small to accurately reflect the views of the American people? And yes or no, and what do you think about that?
Well, it can be seen with the Reapportionment Act of 1929 that the House was limited to 435 representatives. So it is difficult to give House representatives to be equal to the population of states.
Adding on to this, there's been debates in the House that they want to make Puerto Rico and D.C. a state. So they arise with this question that you asked that the United States is not being represented.
And I guess I was also would like you to examine a little bit the interest groups or the sentiments of the country and whether they are accurately represented, not just in terms of geographical representation.
Well, there is the issue that there are about 5 million United States citizens that cannot vote because they live in United States territories such as Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. So that's another question that arises in debates.
Thank you.
Your opening remarks, I didn't hear a lot about the anti-federalists who pushed back on Madison's idea of the so-called trustee model of representation. The anti-federalists favored instead the delegate model. Could you talk a little bit about this and maybe some other concerns articulated by the anti-federalists?
Well, the anti-federalists, they would have preferred, their fear was that the government was not limited enough, so that they did propose a Bill of Rights, which, is why we have it today, to limit the government more. And so a lot of anti-federalists did want to go back to the Articles of Confederation, which was more each state got one vote, which favored more small states than large states. And as proven in Shays' Rebellion, the Articles of Confederation did not work that well.
And what about that distinction between the trustee model and delegate model?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure. So Madison emphasizes, let's have these trustee models. And what that means is they sometimes do not have to listen to the people. Sometimes they know better than they can go their own way while still looking out for the greater good. Whereas the delegate model thinks, you're my representative, you are simply a mouthpiece for me, right? You don't have any autonomy to go your own way. What do you think about that debate? What should our representatives be?
I think our representatives should represent the people, and I think it should just be that. I mean, as I've seen in the articles of the Constitutional Convention, they met in secrecy. And while they were trying to create a better America for the people as a whole, they didn't really represent the people in the sense that they didn't allow for outside opinion, they didn't talk to members of their states, they just did what they thought would be best. And while at the time it did end up working out, the point of the matter should be that they represent their state, they represent the people, the common people.
Tying this back to today, I think that the media, it's going to be hard if we ever have a constitutional convention again to hold it in secrecy, because the media today is so involved in politics and what's going on in today's world. So to hold it in secrecy would be unbeneficial, tying it back to today.
I would disagree with my partners. I would like the trustee model more, simply because, as we talked about in our essay, about 37% of people cannot mention a single right guaranteed by the First Amendment. So why should those people who don't know anything about government have direct influence in government?
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you, a group of folks from Wyoming, how would you talk to a group of people from, let's say, California about why it's appropriate that your two senators representing your state have an equal representation in the Senate to a larger state with significantly more individuals, and essentially diluting their vote in the Senate?
Could you rephrase that question, please?
Sure, just the idea of people from smaller states, like Wyoming, less populous states, in the Senate essentially have the same or a higher impact, if you will, in the votes that they have, because there's fewer people, but yet they have the same representation in the Senate. How do you think that's equitable, or how would you defend that to somebody from a larger state like California?
Well, it's important to recognize that the Senate is supposed to represent the individual states instead of the people as a whole. That's more the House's job. So because of that, each state naturally is equal. So each state has 2 senators. So they do have a vast superiority over us in the House. They have 53 times as many members. So it does even out.
Is there much difference between representing a state and a congressional district from that particular state?
I think that there.
In our state, there really is not too much difference because we only have 1 district. So it is basically the same. But in other states, it could be different. And there is a small difference because the House will be more responsive to the people, while the Senate is not near as responsive due to them representing the state more than the people.
George Washington also mentioned to Thomas Jefferson that we pour our legislation into the senatorial saucer to cool it. So the House is for the passions of the people, and the Senate is to cool it down and make it more rational and logical.
Does the Senate cool it down so much that it's frozen?
I would argue that sometimes it can, but the United States was founded on the system of checks and balances, right? It is so important for oversight between the different branches, and without that, I think we can't let rash bills be passed. We cannot let rash legislation go into office. And so I think while sometimes it might freeze it, I think it's sometimes for the right reason.
I would also like to mention that Congress was meant to work slowly because, as my partner mentioned, we cannot be passing rash bills that could negatively affect the minority.
Thank you.
Maybe if I could keep pushing you on the anti-federalists, one of the concerns they brought up was this idea of these professional politicians, these preachers that they would become. And the solution they advocated for was term limits and rotating representatives. So you could serve for a period of time, but that was it. And then somebody fresh had to come in there. What do you think about that type of argument?
I think that term limits are a good idea, especially in today's society. And I also think that the repeal of the 17th Amendment that we mentioned in our essay would help with that a lot, because it's difficult to unseat senators in a direct election, and they're there for longer. And because they are there for longer than the people's, the ideas of the people can be lost in those 6 years. And if a senator does something that their constituents disagree with, then they over time will forget about that, and then their representative in the Senate will keep doing those things since they are more likely to be reelected.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And sounds like you have a few fans in the audience. That's great. You've fans on this call as well. So we'll just give you a little bit of feedback now. I'll just go ahead and start with a few comments and then let my colleagues join in. I thought you covered a lot of interesting ground, and I think one of the interesting things now is how topical some of this is. You talked about Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., and you know, I'm sure you were, the House recently voted to make D.C. the 51st state. What happens in the Senate, and obviously talking about the difference in the two bodies, obviously that could be a very different result. But this is a challenge. Who are you representing? Are you representing the state? Are you representing the people? How do you get the right representation? And as one of my colleagues was saying, do you do it for the right? Do you do it because or what? How do you vote? Do you vote based on what you think is right, or is it just sort of you know, take an opinion poll back home and whatever they say is how you vote? You know, those are challenging sort of ways to approach it, and probably, you know, things vary. But the idea of they're individual human people trying to make these decisions, and obviously they need to pay attention to what's going on at home, or else they won't be in office very long. So I thought you did a really nice job covering a lot of those those bases, and I'll pause now and refer to one of my other colleagues to chime in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I would agree with Judge Dunlap. I enjoyed this conversation very much. I just, one thought, when I asked the question about whether the House is too small, I think it's an opportunity to talk about other minority interests in the country and whether they have a voice at that table, whether it's women, minorities, environmental interests, and we can look to other countries that have houses that are far larger than we have in the United States, and whether you think that works. You started us off with a bang this morning, which I really appreciate. Repealing an amendment, I tip my hat to you. So that was a strong argument. And you made a good case for it, and you argued it all the way through. So good for you. You had a little slow start on a question about trustee versus delegate, delegate question, but then you came around, and ultimately I also enjoyed the disagreement among the members. Very, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I very much enjoyed that. I thought you had a command of the Constitution that was presented by all of you. That was impressive. I also liked the disagreement on your own panels. Yes, a level of critical thinking I'd like to see. The question, well, I guess it wasn't the question. One of you brought up the question of secrecy about the convention itself. I would give you maybe a little pushback. Certainly there were some who maybe wanted that secrecy for self-interest reasons, but imagine that you really want to have this open debate where all ideas are on the table, knowing that the public might have access to those ideas might inhibit you in some ways. Because it was secret, they were able to discuss a whole lot of options. One of the funny, more interesting examples of that is Alexander Hamilton getting awfully close to recommending monarchy. And it turns out this wasn't too secret. He came back to bite him down the road. But anyway, fantastic job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we're going to allow you to say your farewells, and I will go ahead and stop the recording in just a moment here. So, judges?
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.